our story theme. We're going to continue it as we come to share some stories of our own. And I'm hoping that some of you will be prepared with things that you want to share. But there was a few things that I wanted to say first, if that's all right. If it isn't, it's tough. I'm going to say them anyway. First off, I just wanted to remind us of the power of testimonies. I've been using some daily Bible reading notes by Bill Johnson this year. And this is a reading just from a couple of weeks ago that came up and was relevant. I thought it would be good to share it this morning. He starts off by quoting Deuteronomy chapter 10, verse 21. It says, "He alone is your God, the only one who is worthy of your praise, the one who has done these mighty miracles that you have seen with your own eyes." And then his reflection on that verse is this. So this is from Bill Johnson. "Testimonies keep us encouraged and aware. When we share these stories, we are releasing the anointing of the spirit of prophecy over one another, saying, 'This is our God. This is what he's like. This is what he's doing. This is what he's like.' It gives us grace to face whatever impossibilities we are currently facing. Sadly, it is possible to lose a sense of awe and gratitude for the miraculous. It is almost hard to imagine, but Israel grumbled frequently to God in the wilderness, in spite of the fact that every day for 40 years they experienced divine health, manna on the ground, and shoes that didn't wear out. Plus, the visible sign of God's presence among them with the cloud and pillar of fire." And then he has this prayer. "Keep my heart like a child's, Lord, full of wonder and appreciation. I never want to grow calloused to your miraculous intervention on the earth." And then he writes a bit more. "Our joy should not depend on the size of the problem, but on the actual invasion of heaven. I've seen thousands of miracles in my life, and some of them have been more dramatic than others, but the truth is I am responsible to celebrate the goodness of God in all of them. As long as we steward our hearts before the Lord and allow his works to point us to him, we will find that his works cannot fail to inspire awe, thanks, and celebration. And when I can be trusted to steward my heart in the seemingly simple things, I become qualified for the more critical. When I focus my attention on what God has done and is doing, I remain or become thankful. That one attitude of the heart changes my impact on the world around me. Perhaps more than any other, it is that one characteristic that enables me to live aware of God." I thought there was some good encouragement for us in sharing stories and why it is important for us to share stories. You know, we share these stories, these testimonies, not to bring glory to ourselves, but to point to what God has done, to encourage one another to go for it in this stuff, to live for him. And we can respond with awe and thanks and celebration. And hopefully we'll be empowered and enthused as we hear and we receive through this. All what God can do in our lives. And I'd like to share a testimony this morning just before I let the rest of you loose, if that's all right. So, the Queen's death was a few weeks ago now. And it meant that the sort of point that I was planning on sharing a bit more about my sabbatical and what I got up to and all of that, I didn't really have the chance to do it in the way that I was thinking. It wasn't appropriate. So I'm just going to continue dropping some bits and pieces in from time to time of what went on. Now, I've said previously that I had a bit of a rough patch in the middle of my sabbatical, and it was to do with a couple of things particularly coming together. One was becoming aware of some of the things that were said at the June church meeting. The other was to do with the power of stories. And it was to do with the publication of an autobiography. Now, I'd heard that this book was going to be published. And the author was a guy who was one of my young people in a youth group in the church where I was youth pastor many, many years ago now. And according to the pre-publication hype, it was going to be an expose of toxic church and family life, and how this lad came to reject Christianity and walk away from faith, and eventually ended up as a heroin addict. So I sort of thought, I wonder how I'm going to feature in this story. So I placed my order on Amazon, on Kindle, so I would get it on the day of publication, and on that day, the book downloaded, and it was there. The first thing I did, and you might think that I'm quite vain for this, is I decided to search some keywords. I searched for my name, and my name didn't come up, so far so good. And I sort of searched some things I thought were relevant, and there didn't appear to be anything on the surface of it that was relevant. So I read the book, and it was heartbreaking. It really was. It was deeply cynical. It was a very unpleasant read. He described an awful family life with parents who, for example, would use Bible verses to quote at one another when they were arguing, to tear strips off one another. And they would do the same to the children as well. He spoke of shame and guilt that manifest itself in all sorts of ways. He spoke of how his brother and sister, who were also members of that youth group, had also abandoned faith and walked away. But I could see, as I read, that some of his rather vivid descriptions about how things weren't true. And I know because I was there. And it wasn't quite like he was describing it. And so how much of the overall thing is true and how much of it is exaggerated, it is quite hard to tell. But whatever the truth is, it was just a really disheartening read. This was somebody who I met with every week. I spent time with him weekly to build him up, to encourage him, to listen to the stuff that he was going through. He was one of those who was there. He was at all the youth meetings. He was at all the camps. None of those got a mention in the book. I baptized him. His baptism was mentioned, and I was mentioned then in the most oblique way that nobody would actually know that it was me. And his story made me sad for a number of reasons, especially for his pain, for the pain that his no-holds-barred book would cause to his family, and to others who were identifiable from what was written. And the fact that every newspaper seemed to give it a 5-star review, it was the Guardian Book of the Day twice in 1 week, that didn't help either. It was the best-selling book on the list of Christian books on Amazon. It's not a Christian book, it's a book that sort of says things about Christianity. And I reflected on my part in this story. Was there more that I could have done? Why wasn't I mentioned? Was it a mercy that I wasn't mentioned? Was it because my role and who I am didn't fit the narrative of what he wanted to present? Was it because my part was so insignificant that it just wasn't worth mentioning? You know, sabbatical is supposed to be a time of refreshing and encouragement, but this just left me feeling grief and disappointment. Now, if I stopped there, it would be a pretty depressing testimony, wouldn't it? I'm not going to stop there. There is more to say. Thankfully, it's not the end. The end of July, as a family, we went to New Wine, one of the Christian festivals. We were there for worship, teaching, ministry, with about 7,000 other people. And it was good to be in that environment after a few years of those things not happening. And one day, we were on our way to one of the meetings, Nikki and I, and a voice called out, "Stuart, Nikki?" And we turned round, and there was another guy who was part of that same youth group, who just saw us in the distance and had come over to see if it was us and to catch up. And we talked for a while, just catching up on what had happened over many years and where he was now and his family. He had a child and all that had been going on in his life. And this lad, Steve, he thanked us for our ministry to him in that youth group, in that time, in that church. He spoke of how God was doing amazing things during that time, how lives were changed, and how his call, he's become a vicar. I suppose we can't have everything. He's become a vicar, and he can trace his call to that back to that sort of time in the life of the youth group. And as we talked a bit about this book, and he said, you just need to know that not all of us turned out like Matt. Now, I hope that you know me well enough by now that I don't believe that ministry is just for paid workers like me. It's for all of us. Ministry is all of our business. And sometimes there is real heartache and there's real discouragement in ministry as we seek to serve God, as we seek to be obedient to his call in our lives. There are times when we give of ourselves and it comes back like a smack in the face. And I just want to encourage you from this little testimony that God is a good and loving God. He's a Father who wants the best for us. In Jesus, we have someone who knows what it's like to struggle, to face really tough times. He shares in anguish. He knows what it's like. And the Holy Spirit goes with us so we can know love, peace, and comfort that comes from the Father, and comes from the Son. In his kindness, God used somebody who I just happened to bump into among 7,000 others, who could say what I needed to hear just at the right time. So let's be open to the encouragement that God wants to give to us. Let's be faithful to what he has called us to. Let's be sensitive to him and to others around us in our church family so that we can be those who encourage. And especially because there are people who just need that encouragement to be able to keep going. Sorry if I've gone on a bit, but I thought it was a story that was worth sharing. So there's time for any of you. It doesn't have to be a long story. In fact, if it's short, that's great. But you're very welcome to come up and share. There's a microphone here. Just make sure you get close enough to it so we can hear you. And if you're feeling shy, I can bring the mic over to you, this mic, so you can stay sat down and speak from where you are. And if you're really shy and you just don't like to draw attention to yourself at all, remember that you can send a written story through to us that we can read out, and we can do that anonymously if you wish. All right, it's over to you. Who's got a story that they'd like to share this morning? Juliet. Are you happy going up there? Can you stand on tiptoes?
I just wanted to share something that's been happening in my neighbourhood. What are you doing, Melvin? Oh, closer. Oh, okay. Since we moved there, we've always been aware that the house was a place that we were meant to be living. And things have happened, and in the first few weeks that we lived there, the next door neighbours to our right said to us, "Oh, we're so glad to have Christians." And that was really lovely. And he's Jewish. Things have gone on and on and on like that around the neighbourhood. And we have a few atheists in our neighbourhood, which is really quite exciting. I think it is anyway. We met some new people at the street party, the Jubilee Street Party. And he was also an atheist. So it's getting quite exciting. And I say that because there's a strong presence of Jesus within our neighbourhood. And Peter nor I like to preach with words. We like to preach with our lifestyle. And in fact, when we had those books, Peter, he's very loyal and faithful. He brought lots of those books to give out at the street party. And I just cringed. I thought, no. Oh, this is just how I'm made. We got to know these new people, and it's really lovely because I've struck up a strong friendship with the wife. And one of the things that I get called occasionally in the neighbourhood, I don't like to say this, but it's called Angel. And that's, I believe, just because I work alongside Holy Spirit, and the interactions that have started are very, very interesting and really encouraging. We have an open home, and they know that we have an open home. And sometimes, well, I know that we do church out of home, or I do church out of home. And recently, this new friend that I'd made said to me, she was sharing some turmoil in her life, and I just said to her, do you want to walk and talk? Just because that's an easier way sometimes to share trauma. And she said, no, it's fine. What you've done is fine. And I said, what have I done? She said, you've listened. And I'm not always a very good listener. But one thing I find really hard is when you meet people or bump into people and they say, how are you, all right? And I know inwardly, they're not really, they mean well, but they're not really interested in how I really am. So naturally, I would not share that. But a long time ago, I was doing some training. Jackie was doing some training, and she used a sheet of paper with different listening ways on it. And I'll try and get hold of it. I know I've got it at home, but I don't exactly know where it is. It is very, very interesting, this piece of paper, all the different ways that we can listen. And there's so much need all around us, everywhere. I see it every day. And people, one of the main things they need is to be listened to. That listening can be giving them time, going into their environment, doing something that they're interested in, but giving them time and listening in a really special, godly way. And I'll look it out. So if any of you are interested in this, interested in just reading it, it would teach you lots of new things that you're just not aware of. As lovely as you are and as great as you are about listening, this is so important, just to listen, because God's always there. We know we can always turn to him. But these people in the world, often, they don't have anybody that is really interested in them, in the core being, who loves their core being, whoever they are, and whatever they believe, say, or in whatever way they act. To know love and acceptance, and to have that someone there to listen to them, is one of the most powerful things you can give.
That's great, thank you. Anybody else? Belinda.
As it's down here already. I didn't know whether to or not, but you know me, because I'm quite shy and retiring. I went to a kintsugi evening this week at Ross and Joy's church, where Patrick, the guy who started it with his wife, was there. And in their area where they've got their books and bits and bobs that you can buy, they'd got some new sweat tops. And I thought, I might buy myself one of those. And I thought, yeah, I quite like that. So I chatted to the girl about it and decided which size would be good. And so I bought this sweat top, and it's got the kintsugi pot. For anyone who knows the kintsugi pot, it's the broken pot that's then repaired with gold. So it says that even though we're broken, we can be even more beautiful. And I thought, yeah, and it doesn't say anything else on it. There's nothing else on it, no words. And I quite liked that. So I got home, and I felt God saying, I don't want you to have that top. I want you to give it to someone else. And I thought, oh, flip. And I was kind of looking forward to wearing that. So this person came to my mind that I would give it to. And I wasn't even sure if they would accept it, because they can be a little, I'm not going to say who it is, they can be a little, whatever, we'll leave it there. But I thought, well, I'm going to go and give it to them. And I think it was a blessing in a way that it didn't have any writing on, because it was just the little picture of the pot. And so I went to this person and I said, I bought you this top. I didn't actually say, God's asked me to give you this top, and maybe I should have done, but I didn't, because I was slightly concerned about their reaction. So I gave the person the top and said, you know, I know that you've been going through some really difficult times. I know that things are really tough for you. I know that you often feel broken. And I just want you to have this top as a representation of it's okay that you feel like that. And good is going to come out of that. And before I gave the top to the person, I prayed over it. And I prayed that every time this person wore this top, that God would come and speak to that person, that he would bring comfort to that person, that he would bring peace to that person. And I've left it there. And I'm excited about what God is going to do to that person. And I think, following on from what Juliet said, it was about listening. And I'm glad I listened to God, because I wanted to keep that top, to be fair. I wanted that top. But God had other ideas. So I think it was about listening and being obedient.
That's good, thank you. Hi, Sam. How are we doing on the height of the mic?
I'll just bend. As some of you might know, my dad is in a care home in Milton Keynes, and in May we were told that he was starting end-of-life care, which not overly nice to hear, but my dad is a Christian and has been a Christian for a long time, and for a long time my dad has wanted to go home to heaven. He has been waiting for the call desperately. So actually, finding out that his end-of-life care was starting in May was good news, because as a family, we knew that. And so I went to visit him, and the deputy manager met with me, and he said, I know that your dad has a really strong faith. He's not afraid of death, and he knows where he's going. It's not a faith I share, but it must be lovely as a family to have that knowledge. So I said, oh, yes, you know, it's very lovely, but just warning you that when my dad dies, I will be a mess. So I know that I get where he's going and it's good, but I will still be a mess. And he said, no, that's fine. And the reason that his end-of-life care started is because he has a pressure sore that was about this big. And he's so weak that his skin is wafer thin. And they said, there's no way we can do anything to heal him now. It's just as soon as he gets an infection, that will be it. And I'll let your imaginations think about why he might be getting an infection so quickly in a pressure sore where his pressure sore is. You put two and two together. And I haven't been able to come to Testimony Sunday for a few months because I've been out in the children's work. But a little while ago, I was speaking to somebody after coffee at church and just saying, I don't know what God's doing. Why is my dad still here? He was and is curled up, lying on a mattress on a floor. And at the time he was incommunicative, that's the word, and there was nothing. He was giving nothing out. His life was, to all intents and purposes, to a normal human being, worthless. He was just lying there. And I didn't understand, as a faithful Christian, why God would be putting him through this and not taking him home where he wanted to be. And I shared this with somebody at church, and they said, yeah, I know what you mean. And, you know, the next day was a Monday, and I go and visit my dad on a Monday, so I trotted in thinking, I'm going to have to sit on the floor, talk at my dad, try not to cry till I leave. And I walked in and they said, we've just got to do some personal care on your dad. Can you wait? So I said, yeah. And I waited, and the floor manager and a nurse went in to do this personal care, and they came out and they said, it's a miracle. And I said, I'm sorry? Well, you know that pressure sore that was this big? We don't know how, but it's now this big. And that can't happen at the stage he's at. And I thought, I've been so mean to God about why Dad's still here. And now God's given me a perfect opportunity to share, and I don't want to. Because I'm not very good at that. And I'm much better at just being grumpy. So I said, actually, you know Dad's a Christian? Yeah, we know. Yes, well, so am I. And we've been praying for Dad, and we would say that is a miracle. Miracles do happen. God answers prayer. And they said, yeah, but what you don't understand is medically this can't happen. And I said, no, because God just doesn't do the medical things. So, we've been praying that there's a reason. And, and I'd love to say right now that they dropped to their knees and gave their lives to Jesus. It didn't happen yet, but Dad's still going, and he is now able to communicate on a certain level, and he is still continuing to get better. And so that means that we have the opportunity to continue to witness to those people who know about his faith, Dad's faith, and our faith, who know that we've seen answered prayer already. And I don't really know what we're supposed to be praying, because we have been praying that God will take him home. And now it's kind of like, I'm not too sure, because he is not going to live forever. But God is performing miracles, and when we don't always see God's plan, he still has one, which may not be a shocker to the rest of you.
Yeah, not a shocker, but I think it's good to remind us of it, isn't it? Yeah, we all need reminding. Thank you. Any more? Judy? You all right with that? Okay.
That's the easy way. I want to tell you about our grandson. He's got some educational difficulties. During COVID, made a bit of a shambles of his GCSEs. Made a choice. He was going to get his head down and get some decent A-levels. So for 2 years, he worked like crazy. He did his A-levels and got good results, and he also did Japanese GCSE at the same time and came out with practically the highest mark he could get. He's now gone off to university to do geography and Japanese. Don't know why, but that's what he's chosen. But he is a very single-minded young man. And when he's made a choice, he's single-minded to the point of being totally blinkered. So when he went off to university, he decided, this is quite obvious from conversations with his mum and with an email that we've had from him, he is now a young man and he knows what he's doing and woe betide anybody who tries to give him some advice, because he's in charge of his life and he knows how to handle these university professors and he will make his choices, which is all very commendable. And then he's got his head down. He says, I've come here for 4 years to work, so I don't need to waste time making friends. At which point the danger bells ring, because that's not healthy. So his mum tries to point out that he needs to make friends. He knows what he's doing. We also try to point out that they've put him in the first year Japanese class, but that's for the beginners, and this is far too easy. He should speak to the professor and get something done about it. No, he knows what he's doing. He can resist his parents and his grandparents and everybody else as much as he likes, but he cannot resist God. So, coming from a Christian family, there are people praying. The result of all this is, during his A-level years, he made friends online with a Japanese young lady who is a year younger than him, and they help each other with their respective foreign languages. At university, he has now met a fellow geography student who turns out to be Japanese. Another young lady with whom he clearly gets on very well, and they have been chatting away. Meanwhile, his university professor, suddenly out of the blue, took him on one side and said that this work was clearly too easy. Did he think he could face catching up, because he was now going to be moved up into the second year Japanese class, which was much more suited to him. So he's now got his Japanese girlfriend online helping him, his fellow geography student helping him with his Japanese, and that means he's making friends at university. And he's got some geography fellows that he's mentioned as well, and they've just been on a field trip together. I think God's got a hand on this young man, even though, having been brought up in a Christian home, he's not quite sure what he believes. But he'll get there.
Thank you, Jackie.
Do what I tell everyone else to do, and I stand on the black line. This is a slightly different testimony, but I think it may help somebody here. My story this week is that I've been away on a retreat up in Northumbria, and it's been a great week. A lot of the retreat was silent, so most of the time until sort of 4:30 in the afternoon, we were in silence, and then we did evening prayers, and then could talk after that and have a meal with each other. And the first day of retreat I always find really difficult, because trying to quieten down the inner self is really hard. If any of you have tried it, you know how difficult it can be, because there's just things racing around inside of you. And I sort of didn't know where I was really. I thought, God, I'm here, but I'm not really connecting with you yet, and I know I will do, and that's fine. But during that time, we used in one of the prayer times a prayer from Thomas Merton, and I felt to share it because Steve preached on prayer last week, and he talked about the fact that sometimes prayer isn't easy, and we all experience that at times. And this piece that I came across, I hope will help you if you are in a place where you're trying to be with God, but it's not really quite happening for you. So this prayer, Thomas Merton is one of the mystics, spiritual writers who has a lot of challenging things to say. My Lord God, I have no idea where I am going. I do not see the road ahead of me. I cannot know for certain where it will end, nor do I really know myself. And the fact that I think I am following your will does not mean that I'm actually doing so. But I believe that the desire to please you does in fact please you. And I hope that I have that desire in all that I am doing. And I think the learning from that is that you may be in your prayer room, you may be taking time on a walk with God and trying to pray to him and not hearing anything from him, not feeling that you're communicating your heart very well to him, but the fact you are turned towards God pleases him. And that's all we have to do, is turn ourselves towards God. And in that turning, the Father's pleased, and if we can allow ourselves to know that, we can then begin to hear from him. And I did hear lots of things from God during the rest of the week. But that prayer, that honesty that Thomas Merton has, I found encouraging and hope it helps some of you as well.
Thank you. Any more?
Trying to bring a bit of gender balance to our storytelling. Just a word of thanks, really, particularly on behalf of the Hygiene Bank team. And I realise that for many of us, it might just mean a box where we occasionally deposit some things. But I want to put a little bit of flesh and bones onto the behind the scenes of that, because there's a huge amount that goes on behind the scenes. And I think for those of us that are involved as a team, sometimes there's all the practical stuff that is at the forefront just to keep things moving and keep kind of stock coming in and going out. But we've got 15 to 20 or more community partners around the city now, and just occasionally we'll capture a little bit more of the kind of links in the chain of what's happening there. And so I was just talking the week before last with one of the kind of key workers at this particular community partner. Is what is a church that's in a very needy part of the city. And they simply wanted to pass on thanks to the team and to everyone involved, because the impact in recent weeks and the scaling up of what they have been involved in has been immense. And that particular day I had 15 referrals, so 15 separate bags, and each referral can often have personal hygiene and household hygiene resources. And he was just sharing how the previous day there were people outside of the centre queuing down the street, and most weeks that happens now, and the scale of need they're seeing is quite significant. But the little part that they play in terms of coming alongside those families and those individuals, and often single parents, they're met with people who struggle to find the words, people with tears in their eyes, people that are just eyes wide sometimes at what they're able to receive. And he simply wanted to express thanks on behalf of them for the little bit that they can do, and then the part that we can play. So every time you place something in one of those boxes, do it prayerfully and just be mindful that actually that is having a huge impact on the lives of those that are extremely vulnerable and for whom life is particularly tough. And so to know that we can play our part and we can pray for them, and we know that they are able to also be alongside and have regular contact and input into their lives, to be Jesus, to be an angel to them. And we trust and pray that God will take and bless and bring about a means to share his love with those that are in a particularly vulnerable place at the moment. But thank you for the part that you play.